Let me turn to you now, Mr. Da Silva. Aid effectiveness has been a constant theme in the aid community. And the question I'd like to put to you now is, given that we've shifted from that Millennium Development Goals perspective into the broader perspective of sustainable development, do you see it as necessary that further steps be taken to enhance the effectiveness of aid or strengthen its contribution to achieving the Sustainable Development Goals? And would you be able to share with us maybe a couple of ideas that may be in circulation within the OECD on how that kind of strengthening could occur? And the second question, perhaps also within that context, is there is the new concept of total official support for sustainable development. And if you could share with us a little bit the latest state of play, the current status of the work in that context.
Thank you. This discussion is really timely since we launched the ODA figures 2 weeks ago, which confirmed that there is an increase for LDC and Africa, hopefully reversing the trend from last year. But there is another trend that is very much related to the point that you have made, Elliot, that is almost 25% of aid in the last 3 years are driven by humanitarian crisis and it's emergency driven, either in donor refugee costs or humanitarian aid. So we need to address aid in this 2030 agenda context in a more programmatic, long-term purpose. And this is also something that we are dealing with at the Global Partnership on Effective Development Cooperation, where OECD and UNDP provides support for this partnership to ensure that the financing for development agenda is linked with the aid effectiveness principles. At the same time, we need to work to ensure that we have more ODA. ODA still plays a vital element. ODA goes where other financing flows don't dare to go, and we need to emphasize the relevance of ODA. 70% of the external contributions to the developing countries come from ODA, but we need ODA to play a more catalytic role, mobilizing the private sector and other resources. So this is very much related to the blended finance. We need to not only to increase the volume of ODA, but making it more strategic oriented and also mobilizing the private sector. Let me just make one comment before going to the thoughts deep. ODA has steadily increased since 2000, regardless the economic crisis in 2008 and some backlash on multilateralism and globalization recently, which shows that ODA has been quite resilient to some geopolitical trends, and this is something that we should value because that's a global public good that we should be all proud of, since we have all contributed to that. That's why we need to go further, and the thought is a way to be consistent on the measurement with the new trends. We cannot keep repeating the billions to trillions narrative without measuring it, without making sure that we provide all the quantitative and qualitative elements to ensure that we are able to have transparency and comparability. So we are developing this methodology through an international task force, including developing countries and OECD countries. We are already launching 6 pilots and working on methodologies that I think will be ready, the reporting directives ready early next year. It captures all the flows from all the providers, regardless the constitutionality level. But the process needs to be inclusive, transparent, and open. That's why we are developing several outreach events, even this week at the Financing for Development Forum.
Thank you very much, Jorge. And I think it's a very important point to be stressed now, that it's important that we understand the true nature of these flows. Some flows can be used for certain types of applications, some flows are more appropriate for others, but much gets subsumed into the headline figure, and understanding how these flows are different from each other, I think, helps us to understand how best they can be used.